Welcome to the Sensible Center podcast, where two middle-aged guys drunkenly talk politics and political reform. Grab an adult beverage and enjoy the show. Further information can be found at sensiblecenterpack.com. You can reach us at sensiblecenterpack@gmail.com or follow us on X at USASCPack. Hey, Bob. How's it going?
Good, Kevin. We got a good show tonight, huh?
Yeah, we'll just jump right into it because we have a special guest tonight, Dr. Tony Bryson. I want to cover on a couple more things before we kind of get into like what we need to do, what needs to be done to solve this problem that we've laid out. But I think you mentioned in your book WikiLeaks, because that served a role in the 2016 election in regards to releasing emails and whatnot. Doesn't it serve a public purpose, WikiLeaks, and shouldn't it be protected? And we clearly threatened Julian Assange. I think that was more on a military secrets type of basis, that he was releasing some of that stuff. But is there a role for kind of the broker who just puts out information that either comes through confidential information? I go back to the Pentagon Papers back in the 60s. I mean, don't we have a right to know that information, and doesn't like a fair broker like that serve a purpose?
That's actually a great question because there's lots to peel back there. You've thrown a lot out there. Let me start by saying that in its purest sense, like in the utopian sense, yes, I think that WikiLeaks provided an important service, allowing whistleblowers to get information out there. The problem was that WikiLeaks was never what you believed it was. It was a political operation. And then it was leveraged by nation states to really put out information that could either discredit or damage those that those nation states saw as enemies to their particular cause. I love the fact that you brought up the Pentagon Papers as a contrast, because it is very, very different issues. You know, the Pentagon Papers were published through journalistic enterprise. They abided by the journalistic and legal standards, and then also abided by journalistic, moral, and ethical expectations. WikiLeaks, on the other hand, did not. Didn't follow any such practices, and ultimately interfered in an election where disinformation was very prevalent. And WikiLeaks became part of that source of disinformation. The Pentagon Papers were an expose of clear abuses of power by a particular administration and the policy that they had put into play. And this was done by the president and the cabinet. McNamara was responsible for a large portion of what happened with the Pentagon Papers. And that directly impacted the United States and her citizens. So I think the Pentagon Papers were directly related to an oversight capacity that the media should have, especially over the sitting administration. It's their job to get out there and ask tough questions, speak truth to power, and keep the electorate informed so that when we have opportunity to take those leaders to task through the ballot box, we have the ability to go properly informed and armed to make the proper decision. The Pentagon Papers were actually a function of the media and oversight of the administration, while WikiLeaks was more of meddling through a nation-state actor. So that's where I would draw the contrast between the two.
But do you think the failure of the media to provide those outlets now that they did back in the Pentagon Papers leads to an opportunity for WikiLeaks to kind of just fill in that fill in that hole
Oh
because
yeah.
that information is going to end up somewhere, right?
Yeah, no, completely agree. Completely agree. Whistleblowers go where whistleblowers have to go. And the media used to be the place for the whistleblower to go. Um,
Right.
Now, you're kind of rolling the dice going to the media because you never know whether they're going to treat you fairly or whether they're going to make the story about you as opposed to the information you're bringing to them. And I've seen it go both ways with people I know. So I,
Or they squash the story, or they put their own spin on it, or whatnot, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. And
you,
that's normally where they completely bastardize the story and go after
right.
the person who's bringing the information forward more so than digesting the content of the whistleblower and saying, "Oh, yeah, this is some awfully messed up stuff. Uh, we should probably report on that instead."
Because I look at Snowden. He went to what, the Guardian. He went outside of the U.S., right?
He
To
did.
kind of, I mean, that's really an indictment on our whole media right there.
Well, it's also I think brings forth a good point as to whether you want to believe that Snowden was a good guy or Snowden was a bad guy.
I go back and forth, but I'm leaning towards good now.
I orig-
Patriot.
yeah, well, I had originally thought he was on the righteous side, but his actions after the fact kind of, I think, have proven otherwise. Of all the places that you would want to go hide, Russia? Really? Russia, Russia, Russia. I feel like I'm on the Brady Bunch.
I'll
Where
give you
else is
that.
he going to go, though? Where's he going to go? China?
Well, there's all sorts of other countries that don't have extradition to the United States. He could have followed Glenn Greenwald and gone to Venezuela, spent his
Yeah,
life
but
in South
look at
America.
Venezuela right now.
Hey, it's no better.
Prices of paradise.
It's no better or worse than Russia, except you got better beaches than Venezuela.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, well, no, you're right on the beach standpoint, but I don't know. I mean, and honestly, I don't know what to believe anymore propaganda wise. I'm sure Russia's not. I'm not calling Russia a great place, but I don't. I also don't think it's as oppressive as our propaganda would lead us to believe either.
I don't know. Try being one of Putin's opponents.
Oh, but I
You're gonna
completely
fall
agree
out
with
of
you.
you're gonna
You
fall out
don't
of
want
a
to be.
window pretty
You,
quick.
yeah, you don't have free speech there in that sense, but you don't have it in Venezuela. Look at what's happening in England right now.
Yeah.
England sent a letter to Elon Musk tonight, basically threatening him that they didn't want Trump live on Twitter because of their citizens might hear him and that they might go after him for it. And if that letter's out there to read, and now they've threatened some American citizens that England might go after them for what they're saying about what's going on over there. England doesn't have freedom of speech either. So I mean, if you want to use, I don't they don't have the same record of killing people who say things that are negative about the monarchy over there or any of the political bureaucracy or bourgeoisie. But yeah, they don't. We do. That's the one, not the one, but that's the thing about America is we do continue to have a strong First Amendment. I hope it holds up.
The First Amendment is actually an interesting point to tackle. The First Amendment, there's all sorts of countries around the world that have just similar rights that we have here. Like I say, grew up in Canada. Do I feel that I had more freedoms there than here? Yes and no. Um, Again, different perspectives on freedom. The First Amendment, you're free to say what you want in Canada. You're free to say what you want in almost any of the developed nations. The challenge is that in a lot of those other nations, there is responsibility and then consequence that goes with what you say. And that's what is sorely lacking in the United States and free speech. You should have the right to say anything you want, but you should also have the responsibility to own those words and then accept the consequences of what happens when you use your free speech rights. Frankly, if
I
you
agree
go
with
and
you.
if
As long as it's not an arrest by the government, I generally tend to agree with you.
well, if you espouse hate speech, that results in somebody getting killed, I think you should be held responsible for that hate speech, and you should deal with the consequences of it.
That's
It's just
that's
like,
a pretty difficult bar to prove. I mean, what define? Yeah, how do I say this?
You're
You could
saying, how do you
loosely
draw the
tie
causation?
anybody's
Right.
statement to somebody else's action, right? I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, you could say President Biden's target comment about Trump or bullseye comment about Trump resulted in the assassination attempt. I mean, should Biden be charged with hate speech as a result?
well, you can go back
Any
and say the
reasonable
same
person would
thing
say
about.
no.
You can say the same thing about Sarah Palin, her comments and putting a bullseye on Giffords in Arizona that resulted to her getting shot in the head.
And is it reasonable to say that it was her fault? No, I don't think it is. It's not. But
I
think you'd have to provide evidence that the person who shot was influenced by that somehow through a mention or some type of evidence, right?
I can't think of any circumstance in the recent past where that's happened.
No, I agree. It's hard to show causation in those cases. I mean, similar to January 6th, right? Did Trump speaking before the riot, fairly direct connection because it happened a couple minutes later and he told them to go down there, but whatever.
He didn't tell him to riot and go through the Capitol.
Not in so many words.
Yeah, not in so many words.
There's evidence that police were holding the door for people as they walked in as well. Just want to point that out.
But yeah, that's where we get into this free speech and the consequences of speaking your mind. Yeah, it's his opinion and whatnot, but there should be consequences to that.
Yeah, my point is, if you go into a crowd and you incite that crowd to do something, say like you attack a visible minority and you suggest that the crowd should lynch that individual, and they go ahead and lynch that individual, you've incited that. You deserve the full
I agree with you.
full consequences of the law landing on your head. And
I
just
completely agree with you. I will draw the line that you have to prove that it was because that individual was a minority. Like attack that minority because that's one thing. Attack that individual because of something else, that's a crime as well, absolutely. But it's a different crime.
Yeah, like I say, in other nations, you have responsibility tied to your words. Here, we don't have that responsibility, and we definitely don't see the consequences of espousing free speech. I always point back to Milo Yiannopoulos. Guy was just an absolute bomb thrower. That's all he did. He was there to rile up people, incite them, and get them to do stupid things. And his followers would do stupid things. But was he ever held? Was he ever taken to task for it? Was he ever held responsible for any of the things that he really said? Not until he got absolutely canceled. And canceled
I
culture.
haven't seen him lately.
Nope.
Yeah, he popped his head up maybe 6 months ago. I don't remember what it was. I saw him referenced somewhere. Obviously, it wasn't much, but yeah, he's disappeared.
He was all over 5 or 6 years ago, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he was.
Before we kind of get into the solutions end, I just want to touch on the current election cycle and especially what's been happening in the last couple weeks. I view the Democrats as kind of using some of the techniques and playbooks from uh, what Trump has been using, either trolling them a little bit, using memes. Um, what do you think of the JD Vance couch issue and sort of the Waltz identifying them as weird and sort of the use of memes and all these kind of things that catch on in the zeitgeist sort of to kind of propel the campaign forward, which I think they've done a horrible job in the past. I think Biden did a horrible job of that kind of stuff, and Trump used the techniques much better. And I'm wondering if the Democrats are learning a little bit.
Well, I think the fact that JD Vance had an affair with his couch, that's worthy of a podcast all on its own.
Allegedly.
I mean, how often did he have
Although I think
Congress
that's
with
false.
his couch, and did it result in a number of bastard ottomans scattered around the living room, right? How do you explain it? I think it's bullying turned around. Trump has displayed this bullying behavior for years, and the Democrats have finally figured out, hey, let's try and turn the tables. So the Democrats are finally developing a backbone and using their most effective weapon against conservatives that conservatives struggle with, and that's humor. So it's interesting to see the politicians finally lean into that. The last one that was like really good at it was the senator from Minnesota that was forced to step down.
Al Franken.
Yeah, Al Franken. Thank you very much. Al Franken was a funny man.
Right.
But they just he was the last guy who really used humor to his advantage. And I think it's kind of entertaining to watch the Democrats do this. And to me,
right, it is entertaining. And I personally, I have found Trump entertaining over the years.
I think Trump's very entertaining, and he's used humor a lot.
He's definitely a character, and
I knew he was going to be president the minute he made that Rosie O'Donnell line in that early debate. I was like, this guy's going to be the next president. I didn't believe it till then, and I wasn't a fan.
It's funny because it is gaining traction, because I think people, they view JD Vance as a real questionable character and enjoy having some fun at his expense. Actually, the only way this could have been better is if it were Matt Gaetz, although a couch was probably too young for him, and he probably had his eye on a cradle instead.
Allegedly.
Sorry, that was too easy. That was too easy.
Yeah, so I think we're on the same page that they're kind of using that bullying comedy thing, which, politics is generally fairly boring and talking about policy. And in today's environment where people's attention spans are so short, to have the ability to use that kind of stuff in the news cycle. And I've always screamed at the TV that they should be doing more of it.
Well, our election cycle is so long.
Right.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
We got to do something about, like, in Canada, election cycles are, I think, 6 weeks now. They shortened them. They used to be, I think they're only 6 weeks now.
And that money here.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. There's so much money in politics. Since Citizens United, money has just flooded in, and it has made politics more of fundraising than it has been about governing. So,
yep, we talk about that a lot on this podcast.
There's an interesting thing going on in the media, kind of Twitter right now, that's brand new. I don't know if it's happened before. It's interesting. You guys might have an interesting take on it. So Trump was on Spaces tonight. Everybody knows that. And he was on video. So there's video of him out there looking at his phone, talking to Twitter, right? And people were actively making emojis and things during the Twitter thing to try to show up on his phone. So there's all kinds of people up there that took snapshots of their Twitter avatar on Trump's phone during his conversation. So Twitter's just being spammed right now with all these pictures of Trump sitting there over his phone talking. It created media for him that wasn't even intended or really thought of until right now. It's interesting to me, just the image of it, you know. I don't know what effect that'll have on anything.
Well, it's going to have one effect. It's going to make Trump more Trumpy. I think that's going to feed into his ego, and it's going to make him probably
I agree.
think that he is that cat's pajamas.
So in your book, you talk about cognitive dissonance, or people voting against what would be perceived self-interest.
Yes.
Examples would be evangelicals voting for someone that would be perceived to not act morally, or poor people voting for politicians who campaign on inflationary practice. In today's zeitgeist, or cultural environment, for those who might not understand the word, is there hope for people to get back to voting or acting in their best interest?
Not until they become educated on the issues. And that falls back to the media. We have to take back our media. It's funny. The slogan for, Trumpists is "Let's take back our country." I would like to see everybody just step up and say, "Let's take back our media. Let's try and get the media to do the job that they're supposed to be doing, and help inform the electorate so that we are better positioned to pick better leaders." Because frankly, every single one of our members of Congress sucks. They're horrible. And the problem in the United States is that it's always the other guy that is the problem, not my guy.
Yep.
And sorry, if you go into the card game looking for the mark and you don't see it immediately, you're the mark, right?
Yep.
So people have to develop some self-awareness and understand that they're part of the problem, but they are ultimately the solution at the same time. And the only way that we're going to get to that solution is to have a better media and better educate our electorate.
In your book, you talk about framing and also repetition in messages. It doesn't really matter what your choice of news org is, or political alliances for that matter. If repetition, whether across a single channel or many channels, you can go ABC, CBS, NBC, if they're all saying the same thing, is that really all it takes to swing opinion?
Yes. Repetition is an extremely powerful communication strategy. Repetition is a very powerful communication strategy. Unless you missed it the first two times, repetition is a very powerful communication strategy. It's amazing that if you can hear a message more than 3 times, it begins to resonate with you, whether you want to accept it or not. Think of all the crappy commercials that you have heard in your life, and they've managed to stick in the back of your head. Why? Because you've probably been exposed to them multiple times. Same thing goes with political communication. Repetition is extremely powerful. And if you hear the same message from multiple sources, or what you perceive as multiple sources, you're more likely to accept that whole cloth as truth, as fact. And this is one of the reasons why Fox News and right-wing media have such a huge advantage over what is the conservative media, or what people think of as the liberal media, because the right-wing media has gone and built this mechanism where somebody like, Glenn Beck, we'll go back in time to when I wrote my book. Glenn Beck had his spot on Fox News, and then he had a radio show, and then he would go and have a blog or something on YouTube. And people consuming those particular media sources would say, well, I've heard it from 4 different sources. It must be true. It's the same guy saying the same thing, just from 4 different places. So again, repetition is a very powerful communication strategy. And we should not discount the importance of repetition. It's why the news hole is repeated as many times as it is, so it gains traction within the zeitgeist.
You mentioned in your book that you predicted the outcome of the Trump election, the first one. How do you see this one going? And I know it's early, so I understand if you don't have an answer.
Yeah, it is early. I think that I felt that with Biden in the race, that it was going to be tight. You're going to have the people that are going to vote for Trump. There's going to be like 38% that are going to vote for Trump no matter what. And then you're going to have probably 40% over on the liberal side that are going to vote for Biden no matter what. And they're just going to bury their heads in the sands and not recognize that both candidates are flawed. Both candidates should not be running for office at the advanced age that they're at, because they both display significant levels of cognitive decline. So I felt that was going to be a very close race, and it was going to come down to the independents going one way or the other. Now with Biden out of the race, everything that the Trump campaign was throwing at Biden about him being old, displaying cognitive decline, all of these particular issues are now coming back to him. They've boomeranged. And that's a real big problem that you have when you put together these particular communication strategies. You want to make sure you isolate yourself from blowback or from that boomerang action. And unfortunately, everything that they invested their time and energy in is now being bounced right back onto candidate Trump. So candidate Harris, she's new, she's fresh, she's younger. She appears to have a lot more on the ball. We will find out more, I think, as we get into the debates, and she holds more press availability as to whether that is accurate or not. But that's the perception right now. And that's going to carry her and then a significant surge forward. I think that when it came to the selection of the two members on the tickets, I think J.D. Vance was a horrible choice. When they announced his name, I was like, oh, wow, you just opened the door. When the Dems announced Walz, I thought for sure they were going to go after Shapiro, but they went with Walz. And I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting to see how people react to him. And people have reacted very, very positively to him as the VP pick. So naturally, there's a big bump from that as well. But like you say, it's still early. These things can turn around. But if I was to make a call right now, I would probably say it's going to be the Dems, because they're going to win over the swing voter. They're going to pick off the vast majority of those undecideds. Trump is not doing himself many favors right now with some of the things that he's saying in the media, and his campaign events have been a train wreck. He just goes off in all sorts of different directions. And like I say, everything that he pointed at Biden has boomeranged back on him now. So now his cognitive decline is now in question.
I would say I agree with you. My take is it's the Dems to lose, and they have a distinct possibility and a decent chance of doing that. I mean, it's what's to come. It's can she perform? Can they perform together? Answer the questions, get things covered, develop a strategy. Um, I, personally, I think their strategy's just going to try to ride the wave and probably not provide too much detail or specifics, which I don't disagree with that strategy.
Yeah, I think she eventually needs to get out and answer questions. She's going to get pressed on that. I think the reason
Agreed.
she hasn't done any press interviews or anything, I think right now they know she's so bad at it. She's getting trained. I think she's riding the wave a little bit, and she's getting some formal training. And then I think over the next few weeks she'll start to do some interviews and maybe be a little more prepared for obviously the debate or debates coming up. That's my. But I also think it's too early. I'm sure the right is holding cards back on both her and Walz, and I'm pretty sure the left is holding some things back as well. It's all about timing. The convention is still coming up. There'll be a little bump from that. So I look more towards October, late September and October before I start to form a real.
Yeah, the October surprise is yet to come, and there's always a surprise in October. But just looking at the two campaigns right now, I see the Trump campaign in a little bit of a tailspin. They've really, really soaked everything they could into building a dossier on Biden that they would be able to just rip him to pieces. And I felt that they were in a great position to do so. If you had asked me right after the debate, I would have said it's going to be a landslide because Biden looked so feeble, just could not handle any type of pressure at all.
I told Kevin nearly a year ago, I said, what's going to happen is he's not going to make it. He's going to back out, and all the bad stuff about Biden goes away, and then the message can be crafted for the future instead of what was. And I think that's exactly what's happened. It's just a matter of, like you said, October surprise. What happens in the economy? Does the Israel situation between them and Iran and their proxies get worse? I mean, that's the kind of thing that's going to matter. But from a messaging standpoint, I think you answered my question anyway. I think.
Well, you'll like this. The other Dr. B in the family, she actually called it. Got to be about 8-9 months ago. She said that neither Biden nor Trump would be the candidates before the election. So she's 50% of the way there.
Yeah, I think well, Trump was almost not there. So it could still happen, but what did happen was.
And that would be a podcast and a half to have. Let me tell you, if he drops out and the Republicans have to scramble for a candidate, that would be an interesting podcast.
I'm not exactly sure how that works, but I think the candidate would be Vance.
In that case, I think it would be a blowout because I think there's way too many people who don't think he is ready for prime time.
Yeah, I think I said it before. I would have preferred Vivek over Vance. I think he was a better candidate for many reasons. But
yeah,
you talked in the book about mass media and how the behavior of mass media really led, and it continues to lead, to people leaning away from legacy media, newspapers, TV, radio. With the exodus and with what has happened over the last few election cycles, has mass media learned any lessons? from the last time, or are they doubling down? And in the end, I think I know the answer to this part of the question, but what's their intent?
Money. It's all about the money. Show me the Benjamins. That's all that matters. Again, everything's a profit center.
I thought that might be the answer.
Yeah.
So have they learned anything, or are they doubling down on that? Or,
I think they learned a lot. I think they learned that sensationalism sells, sex sells. Use that to your advantage. Again, they want to make money, so they're going to give airtime to people to say really dumb things, and the dumber the better, because that's where the people watching the programs are going to go, I think I'm smarter than that guy running for president right now.
that's what Kevin lets me on the podcast.
We say lots of dumb things, but we haven't gone viral yet. It's still waiting at it.
Just wait for the next pandemic. You guys can go viral then.
Your book was really insightful.
Thank you.
I thought what you said made a lot of sense. There's obviously value in that, I think, from a political candidate standpoint as well as a media standpoint. Because again, media wants to make money. Have you been contacted by any political campaigns asking for help, or any news organizations
It's funny.
for help?
I've got a friend in the neighborhood who has worked with the Arizona Democratic Party, and they invited me to an event, and I went and talked with some people there, and I guess they did not like the message that I gave them, because I told them that their messaging it blew.
Stuck. Right.
Yeah. It's horrible. It's horrible. The Democrats. It's one of the reasons why, like I say, it's really early, because the Democrats always have the ability to make a mess of the bed or fall on their sword. It's like clockwork. You just know it's going to happen. So trying to help them with messaging is extremely difficult, and I think the reason behind that is because they are truly a much bigger tent party than the Republican Party is. They draw a much more diverse electorate, while the Republicans are more homogeneous in the electorate that they draw from. So the messaging campaigns are much easier to draft for conservatives than they are for liberals.
They want to be inclusive. They don't want to upset anyone.
Exactly.
And that just waters down whatever message you're going to make, right?
Waters it down. Good God, it's transparent. There's no substance to the attacks that they try and put together. It's just they're terrible at what they do. So like I say, this whole weird thing, it's kind of refreshing to see that from the Democrats. It's like, wow, this is something that the Republicans would do. So maybe the Democrats have learned something. Maybe they finally figured something out.
Is there some sort of measurement or metric out there that shows one side of the aisle exploits the use of myth and disinformation more than the other?
You've seen several different watchdog organizations develop over the years, and different media outlets do real-time fact checking and keep a running tab on things. I do believe it was the Washington Post assigned somebody to track Trump's missteps, mistruths, lies, depending upon how you want to frame it, during his first 2 or 3 years in office. And he was well over 10,000 lies during that time period. So there have been mechanisms like that. I know that there are websites out there that try to track media sources and determine their bias. how often they lean into facts, how often they lean into mistruths. Um, but I would say that there's no hard metric that can be used. That was something that I thought about when I did my dissertation, is trying to dream up a measure, because that's how you make a name for yourself in academia, is come up with something that becomes a well-established measure and that everybody then uses. Then you're pretty much, a legend in your own mind. Um, so,
I'm already there and I can't measure shit.
well said. But yeah, it's not that easy, because again, measuring something that is you know qualitative, like speech, is really, really difficult. When I did my dissertation, I focused in on the particular message and where it came from, and then showed, just absolutely, just put reference after reference after reference after reference into every section that I did, so that there was no doubt about balance within the document itself. Um, and it's really important that you try and do that when you're writing a dissertation. You always have to try and stick to your methodology and follow where the data goes. And it worked out in the long run, but it was all, qualitative. The quantitative aspect of it um, was minimal. I would say, like in a traditional dissertation sense, where you go and do a whole bunch of statistical analysis, um, because there is so much gray area in determining bias within a message. It is truly subjective from individual to individual to individual. It's like trying to say something is true. Truth is fluid. Truth is based off of,
Relative.
yeah, exactly. It's based on your learnings, your upbringing. You're going to develop a truth that is unique to you. It's kind of like if you give a person one book and you let them only read from that one book their whole life, their truth is going to be based only in what is in that book. But if you give them an entire library, their truth is going to be much more broad. It's going to be much more nuanced. There's going to be a lot more information that impacts and influences that particular truth. And that's part of the problem that we have right now as far as media consumption in the United States goes, is we're finding people collapsing into isolated bubbles. They get information that they like, and then they go out, as opposed to searching for information that challenges what they think they know. They will instead go out and find information that confirms their particular bias. And they get caught in that confirmation bias bubble, where they're only looking for information that confirms what they say, as opposed to challenging themselves.
Your book mentions there's a evidence that you're born to think like a liberal or a conservative.
That is true.
If so, is it peer pressure and media susceptibility alone, or in large part, that drives young voters? And is that why one party more than the other seems to rely so heavily on influencers?
That's an interesting way of spinning that particular question. That's interesting. I never would have thought about influencers. I would have looked at that particular question and said, well, there's a little bit of environment and there's a lot of biology involved. We really are born and wired a certain way. Conservatives are wired where they rely heavily on the amygdala for processing, while Liberals are more wired to rely on the prefrontal cortex for their reasoning. The two brain structures are very, very different. The amygdala is kind of at the base of the brain, just above the brain stem. It is the center that regulates a large majority of our emotions. The prefrontal cortex does some of the emotional processing as well, but the amygdala is the portion that is in charge of our fight and flight response. So it is very, very subject to fear reprisals. If you feel fear, your amygdala is going to shut down all higher brain function and you're going to kick into flight fight response. And that's the way that conservatives are more wired. Liberals are they rely more on that prefrontal cortex, which is where your justice centers are, your social justice centers, and your reasoning. That's why if you ever sit and watch a shooting unfold, you're going to know who a conservative is and who a liberal is. The conservative is going to duck and run. They're going to make sure they get the safety. The liberal's going to stand there and wonder, what's going on? And sit there and think about what is happening before they take the bullet. Maybe a bad analogy considering the environment we find ourselves in, but that is kind of the way these things play out. If you really want to build good frames to appeal to both parties, for Republicans, you build a fear-based appraisal. If you're doing something for Democrats, you go and build a social justice frame, because those are the two sections of the brain that each of the different ideological positions tend to rely upon.
You mentioned that liberals tend to react more positively to messages that present them with a choice. They like options. Would Trump make an effective argument against Kamala by highlighting that the Democrats robbed them of a primary choice?
No, because that's fear-based appraisal.
Can you explain that?
Basically, what all he's doing is trying to scare the voters that they didn't get the chance to vote. I don't think, again, it's more of a binary decision, more so than something that I don't think that's a good social justice frame. I'm thinking of a possible good social justice frame that Trump could use against Harris. He could easily go and point to her work in California as the AG and show some contradictions in some of the things that she did. That would introduce some nuance. That would introduce something that the Democratic voter would have to really think about. I think that would be an effective line of attack. If you framed an attack that way, it would be fine. But if you went to something that was just so black and white, I think that would be much more effective against a conservative voter.
Interesting. So you talk about stress, and I think we got into this a little earlier, but this was the question I was thinking about. You talk about stress and how high long-term levels of it can prevent the brain from coming to a rational response.
That's correct.
While Trump was president, I started to perceive the media's constant fear-mongering and crying wolf about Trump. Some examples are, he's going to start World War III. Didn't happen. He's going to reverse civil rights. He's going to destroy the economy. I saw it as white noise. Constant noise. It made it difficult to kind of get a sense of objectivity on anything. Started to kind of feel like crying wolf, if you will. Is constant saturation like that in the media detrimental to society? Does it diminish people's likeliness to react in a true national emergency? Potentially something like COVID, for instance.
Yes, it causes people to check out. The type of communication that I think you're referring to are, again, fear-based appraisals. They tend to how they function is, like I say, they hit the amygdala and they kick off our fight flight response. They kick off our fear, and when you are fearful, your body releases cortisol, and that goes into your brain, and over time it becomes very addictive. Just like any endorphin, it can become extremely addictive. It's why adrenaline junkies do some of the things that they do. They become addicted to adrenaline. Well, in this case, you become addicted to cortisol, and you will go back to whatever source it takes to get that cortisol kick. What you really need is a good release of oxytocin that is going to counter that and bring you back down from that fear high. And unfortunately, that's not what we see. And over time, cortisol can be very damaging to the brain, as can any type of drug, any type of stimulant to the brain. It can cause long-term damage. So I think that that's ultimately what we see. I know there's been a number of papers and even a couple of documentaries on the long-term effect of the exposure to, and you're not going to like this, but long-term exposure to Fox News, because they continually run fear-based appraisals almost all day long. And for older people, that's very difficult, because older people tend to get up, turn on the TV, and sit there and listen to the same channel all day long. So they're getting hit with these fearful communications all day, and it's releasing cortisol all day long. And it can actually do significant harm to your brain and your cognitive function. So it is something to be concerned about. Like I say, it's one of the reasons why I think we need to take back our media, because they're not doing things that I think lead to a healthy nation. People will either tune out, or they will burn out, or they'll just start losing their minds, which is what you see with that cortisol overdosing.
Great. I hate to end this on a low note, like overdosing, but this has been great. Kevin, do you have anything more you want to chat about?
Yeah, I'm going to try to end it on a high note. Now that we've talked about Trump derangement syndrome.
That's a great question.
I think that's what you were trying to get at, Bob.
Well, it wasn't, actually. I mean, I really did think the white noise stuff, I just thought, man, it's just constant oversaturation. I'm tired of it. I'm tuning out.
Well, I think they partly do that because they're also feeding their audience, and it's about money. And yeah,
they're
similar to what Fox does. It's CNN, MSNBC to some extent.
Hey, the traditional media
oversold it, right?
Yeah, the traditional media saw the money that Fox is raking in,
right.
And they're like, we want a cut of that pie. So it's just like any businesses that are in competition anywhere, they're going to chase each other. And so the traditional media started to chase Fox, observed how they were doing things, started to replicate the things they were doing. You know, Fox was the first to come on with the Chiron. A lot of the real powerful imaging that they have, every network then adopted the Chiron. They then adopted all those splashy graphics.
So I guess I want to end on a high note. We've painted this sort of dystopian media landscape. Um, you had mentioned as far as possible solutions, and I know you get to those in your book also, as far as bringing back the fairness doctrine, probably taking out some of the profit interest in at least the mass media, um, bringing back sort of true journalism, reinvesting in journalistic integrity, probably taking some money out of politics and how that's with the corporate sphere and how that's driving our media on messaging. But at the end of the day, I always say we get what we deserve, right? As citizens, as consumers, that if we don't demand more, if we're not educated, if we don't do the legwork ourselves, we deserve what we get at the end of the day. And to that point, you talk about media literacy. And I thought that was a great idea. I've never seen that presented before as sort of we teach our kids certain things, and we need to now start teaching them media literacy. And I agree totally because they're going to come out and they're not going to know just be the amount of information and the fire hose of information that everyone receives is too much, and we need to start educating people how to have some level of discernment, right? So, could you talk a little bit about that and give us some hope that maybe something will happen to turn this tide around?
Sure. Yeah, I think that the solution to this ultimately will be media literacy. And media literacy is where you teach um, kids of all ages, even adults, how to discern messages that come through our sources of media. There are very telling cues where you that should immediately flip on your bullshit meter and let you know that that really doesn't smell right. I should probably do a little bit of research on this. Now, part of the issue with media literacy is people have to be intellectually curious. They have to
Well,
want to
if you
go
could
out and
stop right there.
we're doomed.
We're not known for that in this country, are we?
um, no, well, you're kind of right there. Americans, for the most part, aren't the most intellectually curious bunch. Um, I think that it's the reason why our media has evolved as it has. We're very much more of a nation that likes to be spoon fed information more than go out and get it ourselves. It's why social media has become so powerful and has had such influence because messages are now being pushed directly to you as a consumer, specific to you. The algorithms are pushing information that you want to hear to you. And unfortunately, we are not equipped with those media literacy skills to take that stream of information coming to us to discern facts from fallacy. And we're not prepared to take on the challenge of properly educating ourselves on the issues. It's much easier just to take, well, that guy said this in a tweet. I'm going to take that whole cloth. He's somebody that I have followed. So obviously he's a righteous dude. He knows what he's talking about. When in reality, it could be that he's completely full of it and has no idea what he's talking about on the topic at hand. So those media literacy skills would help us quickly identify that. You would be able to tell, okay, is there potential bias within this message? Here's the indicators of that. Is this person a subject matter expert in this particular area? Where are the indicators of that? They're lacking. This particular stream of media may not be considered the most consistent in the presentation of media, of information. Maybe I should take that in consideration. And then what's the bias of the platform itself? All of those things go together and help inform a consumer as to understanding the media that is really showered upon them. And we are hit all day long. We get up in the morning and we're pummeled with media until we go to bed at night. And some of us even leave the radio on and sleep with the radio on at night. So we're continually bombarded with media and messages. And it's something that the way out of this is education, is getting people to understand what those communication cues look like, and learn how to discern fact from BS.
Well, I couldn't agree more on that, and I encourage you to start a school of media literacy, and I suggest that Bob be your first enrollee.
I need like a good
He needs
discount, 10% discount. I honestly, thinking about it, when I first started the book, I don't know, I was within the first couple chapters, I was like, he went to school for this stuff, and I would love to go to school for this stuff. This is something I would just absolutely love to study and know. I would absolutely do that. But at the same time, as you know, you can only spread yourself kind of so thin on learning, and then you have to start changing jobs and things, and I'm not quite there either.
Hey, that was the biggest challenge I had, working in the IT field and then going down this rabbit hole, and then, all of a sudden finding myself teaching it. It was a life-altering experience. So yeah, a lot of people aren't prepared for those particular challenges, and that's one of the weird things about education, is that it is continual learning also means continual changes within your life. And you may find yourself going down one pathway, and all of a sudden, I'm going to take this off ramp and go over here for a while and see what it provides. And that's one of the exciting things about education to me.
I think it's what works for you and what makes you happy, and it's kind of a balance, I mean, there's different definitions of happy, and there's different ways to get there. And if you put yourself in a position to be comfortable in life and do exactly what you want, you're interested in, that's an amazing thing.
I agree with you, and Crown Royal makes me very happy.
I agree.
Well, you've provided us inspiration and a wealth of information. We can't thank you enough for coming on. Your book is available on Amazon, Trump Card. I encourage everyone to look that up and give it a read.
Bryson.
Anthony Bryson, Dr. Anthony Bryson. Anything else you'd like to promote before we sign off?
No, you guys have said it all. Thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it. It was fun. Anytime you want to chat, just reach out.
All right. Thanks for taking the time.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.